You're tuning in to the Black Hollywood Live Network, featuring news, interviews, and commentary on all things Black Hollywood. Hollywood redefined. From Los Angeles, California, presented by Maria Menounos and streaming live thanks to Akamai Technologies. This is Black Hollywood Live. Justice is served. Featuring the week's roundup and commentary on legal news. Black Hollywood Live. Hollywood redefined.
You're listening to Black Hollywood Live.
And now, the host for Black Hollywood Live, Justice is Served.
Hello, everyone. I am Mari Fagel. This is Justice is Served.
Good morning. This is Ebony K. Williams.
And thank you for joining us this week. We're going to jump right into it. We have lots to talk about. And our case of the week this week, you have been following this case extensively.
I have.
This is Aaron Hernandez, the former NFL football player, Patriot player, indicted on charges of first-degree murder. So, Ebony, tell us what's been happening.
So finally, right, it seems like this was the indictment that was never going to come down. This was scheduled to happen. We expected this over a month ago. When they went to court, the judge gave a continuance so that the state could present more evidence, offer more witnesses, so the grand jury could indeed find an indictment. And when they handed down this indictment on Thursday, Mari, it was basically right before the nick of time, because also scheduled the same day was the probable cause hearing. So had that jury not come down with that indictment the day of, they would have had to probably move forward with a probable cause hearing. I don't think the judge would have given a second continuance. So I was talking about this case this morning on NFL AM, and one of the key components they were asking me about was this issue of timing and what this kind of indicates to us, that it took a rather long time for this jury to indict. So we talk about burdens of proof. The burden of proof for grand jury indictment is significantly less than the burden of proof you have to prove at trial. At trial, you've got to get to beyond a reasonable doubt. If I put a number on that, Mari, I'm thinking that's around 85%, rough estimate. The burden of proof for a grand jury indictment, only more probable than not, so 51% maybe. So the fact that the state had such a difficult time of even getting to that 51% benchmark, to me, indicates there might be some proof problems moving forward. I mean, we'll see, but they still don't have a smoking gun, literally, and certainly these witnesses aren't necessarily the most credible. So this is certainly not the open and shut case that many thought it would be when this story first hit the media.
So is that why you think Aaron Hernandez, I think he exhibited some odd behavior yesterday when the indictment went down.
Right.
He was smiling.
Yes.
And this is coming after weeks of him sending prison letters vowing his freedom and his innocence. So why is he acting so bizarrely? Do you think he is this confident in it because there is such little proof so far?
No, Mari, I don't. I think that I think Aaron Hernandez is a really young guy. Like, he looks really, he's a football player. He's a large toucher. But remember, this guy is a kid. He's
23 years old.
Yeah, exactly. This guy's a kid. I don't even think he fully understands the gravity of what is going on around him. I know he knows he's charged with murder, but I don't think he can begin to wrap his mind around the severity and the seriousness of what's going on. So, yeah, his lawyer's probably telling him, oh, you're going to be fine. He's walking around smiling and writing these letters, and they're getting sold. I don't think he gets how serious this really is.
And can you walk us through what happened that night in June and some of the players involved?
Sure. So the night in question originally was 4 people in the car. You've got Hernandez, you've got the deceased Odin Lloyd, who was an associate. They were good friends. This guy was a semi-pro football player. And another interesting link between him and Hernandez and Lloyd's girlfriends are sisters. So there was a connection there as well. Also in the back seat, apparently, were 2 other associates, somebody named Wallace and Carlos Ortiz. They were all at a club prior to, allegedly, the deceased, Odin Lloyd, was talking to someone that Aaron Hernandez did not fancy. And then that is allegedly the motive as they have so far. Pretty thin motive, obviously. And I do think, although you don't have to prove motive to get a conviction, juries like motive. And when you can't tell them why someone took a life, it's hard for them to reach a conviction. But so the 4 of them leave the club. They go driving off into this field. They go to Hernandez's home first. Then they drive into this kind of industrial area not far from the home, which, again, if you're going to kill someone, why do it so close? Like, basically in your own backyard.
Wasn't it like a half mile?
So close,
Yeah.
Mari. Yeah, very close. And according to Carlos Ortiz, now, again, this is allegedly, according to this very shaky witness here, he stayed in the car. while both Hernandez, Wallace, and also Odin got out of the car supposedly to urinate.
Also, why are they getting out to pee if
Right.
Aaron Hernandez's home is
It's
half
right
a mile
around the
away?
corner. It's ridiculous. But Carlos Ortiz is saying that that's what happened. He, of course, stayed in the car and conveniently didn't
Yeah,
see.
conveniently, he stayed in the car.
Right, he conveniently stayed in the car and did not see what actually happened, but he claims that Wallace subsequently told him that it was Hernandez that pulled the trigger and killed this young man.
The problem I see is this whole story and all this information that you're giving me is coming from Carlos Ortiz. And
Exactly
tell me
right.
about his background, because I think that is going to be a big issue at trial, is his credibility, and the defense team is going to use that to his advantage, to their advantage.
You're exactly right, Mar. That's going to be the biggest issue in terms of making this story fit together. Because basically, there are three people that know what happened that night that are still with us to even testify to it. Obviously, Hernandez has a credibility issue, but yeah, Carlos Ortiz. We already know he's got some criminal charges in the past. Some of them actually having to do with his ability to be truthful. Some larceny charges, some disrupting arrest charges. So not the most credible man. And then there's Wallace, who doesn't seem to be much better in the credibility category. Now, it doesn't seem like he is cooperating with authorities in the same way Carlos Ortiz is. And like you said, the defense is going to use that credibility problem to their advantage. Also, what they'll use to their advantage is any deal that the state makes with Carlos Ortiz in exchange for this testimony. Jurors can see that as a bought and paid for testimony, and they don't take too kindly to that. So, again, whether he did it or not remains to be proven, but this is not open and shut. The way a lot of people really, when this case first hit the media, Mark, people were like, oh, he's guilty, he'll go to jail for life. There's so many unanswered questions, so we'll have to see.
And another person who I think will play a key role in the trial is Aaron Hernandez's girlfriend, because
Sure.
she knows more than she's letting on. And I read an interesting article, I want to get your perspective on this, that Aaron Hernandez, a trial strategy may be for him to marry her before trial because of marital communication privilege. If you could describe that to us and
Sure.
tell us about that.
Yeah, Mar, you're talking about spousal privilege, which basically says because the judiciary wants to honor and respect the sanctity of marriage and the trust and loyalty that marriages should have, there's a privilege that says if you are married, you cannot be forced to testify against your spouse. However, you can choose to. And I've seen it before where people think that spousal privilege is going to just protect her. And the spouse will say, you know what? Forget this. I'm testifying anyway.
Especially if Lloyd's girlfriend, you're telling
Is the
me, is
sister.
her sister.
Exactly. This is very, very messy. But that could happen. And you're right. I think she has a lot more knowledge than she's giving off. We've seen some reports that basically indicate she might very well be the one that disposed of this weapon. She might know where this weapon is. And if that is true, the state is not going to let up on her. They want that gun.
But
They
the
do.
problem is they haven't found the gun. They searched
Right.
a river endlessly and could not find the gun. The other issue I think will come into play that the prosecutors will make a big deal of is the fact that the cameras, the surveillance cameras at Aaron Hernandez's home are not available for that evening. And I think to me that indicates a consciousness of guilt, and that oftentimes it's if you are a suspect and you flee, or if
Right.
you lie, or if you hide something, that's a consciousness of guilt, which can be used to infer that you are guilty. So tell me about the cameras and how you think that will play in.
Right. I mean, certainly, it's certainly very convenient, again, that these cameras that seem to work at all other times, conveniently are not in working order. They're not available to us at this point. Now, they were still able to recover some things, because that's how we got those little surveillance snapshots of what looked to be a gun in Aaron Hernandez's hand after the killings allegedly took place. But it's fuzzy. You can't really make out what this rigid object is. And that will certainly play into, like you're saying, this issue of credibility. Are you somebody who's seeking truth, or are you someone that's trying to cover up something really bad that you did? And that's certainly what it looks like. But again, Mari, all of this stuff is suggestive and looks to be very circumstantial. Now, we have seen cases that get convictions based purely on circumstantial evidence, but it's not the easiest case for a state to try, particularly when you talk about a high-profile defendant like an American football player, and not just any player. You're talking about a tight end for the New England Patriots, one of America's favorite teams, high-valued player. This is not just some run-of-the-mill guy. If you talk to like football experts, this guy is good, good, young, talented, had just signed a $40 million extension deal. The stakes are high here.
And now finally tell us what we're going to look at going forward now that he's been indicted. What's going to happen next?
So now we're moving forward. They're going to have they have a hearing set at the end of the month where they talk about some discovery issues. I was talking about this morning as well. Reciprocal discovery. That's the doctrine that says whatever I say, see, and have and plan to use as the prosecutor, you get to see it as the defense team. So there are going to be a lot of discovery hearings and settings as we move forward and get closer to trial. But don't expect a trial on this for at least probably 12 months. This is probably going to be a year out. Because it's so high profile, they have even more reason to do due diligence, cross their T's, dot their I's, and make sure all their ducks are in a row. Because you get one chance at this apple, Mari. People have to understand, double jeopardy attaches once this gets to the trial phase. And if this man is acquitted, that's it. So the state, they can't take any risk when it comes to this. They've got to make sure all of their witnesses seem credible, trustworthy, and that they can get that conviction.
And especially if they have such weak evidence, it seems at this point, it's really going to take a long time to try to find that smoking gun or the actual gun.
Oh, right. Or because I'm telling you, they barely got this indictment. I mean, it shocked me because when I was first talking about this case on NFL Network, we expected a grand jury indictment in probably 2 weeks, you know, because, oh, okay, sure, whatever. And it just seemed like week after week after week, the jury was like, we are not convinced to the burden that you have to prove. So, I don't know.
All right, well, we are going to move on to On the Docket, our weekly roundup of legal headlines. And I'm going to ask Phil to play DJ for us today because the first case that we're talking about, and I'll have Phil do a comparison for us in a second, Robin Thicke, my favorite song of the summer, Blurred Lines. I'm going to dance to it. It's my favorite song of the summer.
It is awful catchy. Yes, it is.
I love it. Anyways, so Robin Thicke is suing the family of Marvin Gaye, and they're kind of taking an offensive stance here because Marvin Gaye's family said that song that we just heard, Blurred Lines, sounds an awful lot like Marvin Gaye's song that we're going to play right now. Got to Give It Up. I also love this song, though.
Yeah.
I have to tell you.
I wonder why. I'm just saying.
I love them both because they sound so similar.
That's certainly the argument.
That's what Marvin Gaye's family is saying. But the problem is Robin Thicke is saying that you can't own a genre, an entire generation of music, of funk music.
Right.
And that there's lots of other songs that meet this genre and that you can't own a genre just because the songs are similar. And so I thought it was interesting that he's taking the move to sue the family now because the family mentioned that they might be seeking lawsuits, but they hadn't actually yet filed. And so Robin Thicke, T.I. and Pharrell, and the company are suing them. And I just want to read some quotes because I think they handled it well. They said, "We have the utmost respect for and an admiration of Marvin Gaye, Funkadelic, and their musical legacies, but must reluctantly file this action in the face of multiple adverse claims from alleged successors in interest to those artists." And finally, they said, "The Gaye defendants are claiming ownership of an entire genre as opposed to a specific work." Ebony, your thoughts?
Okay, so as you say, Mari, this is it's preemptive, right? This is a preemptive strike. They're doing this in anticipation of the Gaye family filing potential suit, and they probably would have. Now, I got to be honest with you. I remember the moment I first heard Blurred Lines, and in my head, because I'm a child of the old school, I immediately associated it with Marvin Gaye. I truly did. And in that particular song, I'm like, oh, that's smart. You know, they kind of went to a throwback beat, cute, catchy, very summer-timey. I think that that's a good legal argument. I don't think that you can claim ownership over a genre, but I also don't think that's what the Marvin Gaye family is doing here. I think they're talking about, when you listen to those tracks, Mari, there is a very similar in terms of the percussion style, in terms of the beat, in terms of the melody. There's a strong similarity there. How I predict this is going to end, I think it's going to settle. I don't think it's going to get to the point of trial. And I think the Gaye family is due some portion of the proceeds that this song has. Because think about it, if you take that hook out, the song is whack. I mean, it doesn't even do, it is. So, and to act like it's that dissimilar, I don't think is very genuine. I think that's intellectually dishonest.
The thing is, I don't think it's there's some cases that I've seen where it's so similar. I mean, it was, what's that song? Vanilla Ice's song
Okay.
and Police's song were both very, very similar. There have been a lot of situations like this in the past.
Right.
And I think it was a good move for them to preemptively to do this. And I
Sure.
think it was smart of them to handle it in a way they said, we have respect for your family and we
So
love
cut that
Marvin
check.
Gaye.
Great. Go ahead and cut that check and be done with that. And
Yeah.
again, I don't think you need to give them, they don't need a portion of every time the song is played. It doesn't need to be an enormous part. I don't think it's anything like a 50-50 split, but something to acknowledge that respect and the fact that, yes, we were greatly influenced by that song and that sound to get this great #1 hit.
Yeah.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Well, moving on to another big indictment
Yes.
of the week. This came down on Monday. Oscar Pistorius. I've been following this case very closely. I'm fascinated by it. He's obviously the Olympian runner who killed his girlfriend, Reva Steenkamp.
Blade Runner. Yes.
The Blade Runner on Valentine's Day. And it's an interesting case because he claims that in South Africa, where there is a high level of robberies and break-ins, that he was sleeping one night with the prosthetics parts of his legs. He was in bed, they were not on,
Right.
and he heard an intruder. So he got up and did not check to see whether she was in the bed or not, assumed that she was in the bed sleeping next to him, and felt the intruder had locked themselves in the bathroom, and with the door behind them, door between them, unable to see the intruder, shot through the door 4 times. That is his claim. But the prosecutors are claiming that Reva Steenkamp and him had been fighting,
Right.
and that she ran into that bathroom and she locked herself in that bathroom, and him, with his prosthetics on, shot 4 times through the door. There are some interesting parts of this case why they are filing premeditated murder, which is
Right.
difficult to prove if you don't have the evidence. They think they have the evidence for 2 big reasons. One, a big thing is going to be what level those gunshots came in
Exactly.
through the
Yeah,
door.
they're gonna be able to do
Was
some
he wearing those prosthetics
trajectories.
or
Yeah.
not?
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Because if he claims he was in a rush, then he wouldn't be wearing the prosthetics and they'd be lower. But if he was fighting with her, he would be wearing them and they were on and it would be higher. The other thing, and this is why the indictment this week made some big news, is they have a witness list of 100 witnesses, including neighbors who say that night they heard a woman's screams and then gunshots. So your thoughts?
I think I think that these crimes where there's only one surviving witness become very difficult. But as you're saying, with witnesses and the way we can now, with forensic and ballistics and other things, put together the pieces of the story, we don't always have to have a surviving witness to tell us what happened. And I think you're right. I think that between the trajectory measurements, between the levels of that gunshot, between potential witnesses, because if someone testifies, and certainly if more than one person testifies to hearing a woman scream, then his story's a wash. Then no one's going to buy that you didn't know that that wasn't some scary vicious intruder behind that wall. You knew that was your girlfriend. So and also there's going to be other things in discovery that probably come out, Mari. We're going to hear about perhaps violent and angry emails that he might have sent her and text messages. When people are fighting, I mean, we all have, interpersonal relationships. When you're fighting, it's not isolated, typically. Normally there's a lead up to that. So I don't know that this dog is going to hunt, that he's telling this story. This doesn't sound like it's going to add up.
And
see.
I just want to say, so trial is set for March, and I really do want to see 100 witnesses. It seems like they have a lot of evidence,
Yeah.
and I think it will be an interesting case to follow. Obviously, we'll be following this on
Yes,
Justice is
yes.
Served. I want to talk about one more story before we have our guest join us. This is the story of Christopher Lane, and it was interesting because our show was featured on iTunes New and Noteworthy this week, so thank
Yay,
you,
thank you.
iTunes.
Yeah.
And Wishbone Man said he wants us to talk about Chris Lane. I was already planning on it, so I hope you were listening. Christopher Lane is the Australian man who is playing baseball here in college, and he was walking down the street, and 3 black teenagers...
Actually not, Mari. 2 black teenagers.
2 black teenagers. You're right. 2
Yeah.
black teenagers. A third was involved. 2 black teenagers.
No, and 1 white teenager.
Okay.
Michael
okay.
Jones, yeah.
Okay.
And I only correct you on that because that makes a very big difference in the way race frames this case, because and Fox News erroneously did report it that way.
Okay.
That it was 3 black teenagers. And so very quickly people started jumping to these racial conclusions that this was indeed a hate crime. But go ahead.
But, okay, so anyway, so two black teenagers, they pulled up in the car, shot him in the back. They did not know him. He was walking down the street. He was jogging innocently in his girlfriend's hometown. They did not know him. They shot him in the back, and they fled. And they claim that they did it for fun because they were bored. But you said, you know, people have been talking about a hate crime. One of the teenagers who has been charged, this is first-degree murder, they're going to be tried as adults.
And they should be.
One of them sent out a tweet that said 90% of white people are nasty, hashtag hate them.
Yes.
And so I don't think it was just for fun, just because they were bored.
Right.
I think there are racial motivations behind this. And I read an interesting editorial this week. This was on Powerline. And it was comparing the case of Trayvon Martin and Christopher Lane. And I want to get your thoughts on this. The editorial was titled, "If Barack Obama Had a Son, Would He Look Like Chris Lane?" And that was in reference to Barack Obama's speech after Trayvon Martin's death that said, if I had a son, he would look like Trayvon Martin. And the editorial was saying that the Obama White House has not yet, and likely won't, comment on this case because this case does not generate the type of discussion that the Trayvon Martin case did. And the editorial went into the amount of violence that is black on white as opposed to the other way around. And that was that editorialist perspective on that.
Are you ready for my thoughts?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that editorial totally missed the mark. And here's why. Now, again, let's look at the facts of this case and distinguish them from the Zimmerman case. This is two black boys, one white boy. Michael Jones is the white defendant's name. He was the driver. And allegedly, at the arraignment, one of the other, he admitted that he was the one that pulled the trigger. Now, we won't try this case. We're not going to litigate it right here, but that is out there. They killed, horribly, viciously murdered for no good reason this young white college athlete. And it is horrible and horrendous, and no one is going to ever defend those alleged actions. But it is very different and distinct from Trayvon Martin and the George Zimmerman case in that the outrage that we saw with the Zimmerman trial and the Trayvon Martin killing was not necessarily about this young boy being killed. What the outrage and the T-shirts and all of the publicity and ultimately the statement that the president made was a result of the delay and the fact that George Zimmerman was not even arrested. That was what the outrage was about.
And these teens have already been arrested, and it's already been decided that they'll be tried as adults.
They'll be tried as adults, first-degree murder, and that's exactly how it should be. That is the justice system working, at least at this point in the case. Versus with the Zimmerman case, all that America knew, and certainly Black America took it more personally, and that's, I think, very understandable, that there was some 17-year-old boy shot dead and no one was being held accountable for it at all. And that's what the outrage was for. And if you recall correctly, Mari, the president made that statement prior to George Zimmerman's arrest. You know, at that point, the Justice Department, the DOJ, was getting ready to, well, they had already opened an investigation to see if they were going to be the ones to have to hold somebody accountable.
But the White House also made a statement after the verdict well. And,
they did.
You know, he has made several statements about that case, and this editorial was saying he did not think that President Obama would make similar statements as the Christopher Lane case will move forward.
He won't, because the Christopher Lane case, again, Trayvon Martin's case would not have gotten, and I bet my law degree on this and my law license, it would not have gotten the media national attention that it did had George Zimmerman been arrested within a week or two of the murder. Just wouldn't happen, because we wouldn't have had a leg to stand on, Maury. What would we have been mad about? He killed a young boy. That's horrible. He was arrested, and the Florida state justice system will run its course. That would have been the end of that story. It was the fact that it seemed like for a long time he was eluding the justice system that had people so outraged. So there is that distinction. So I think the equivalency between those two cases is false.
Well, actually, I want to get our guest perspective on this.
Sure.
We have on the line Daniel Marie. He is the founder of Million Hoodies. And Daniel, actually, his organization was very influential in the wake of Trayvon Martin's death.
Absolutely.
And in putting pressure and public attention on this case and on getting George Zimmerman charged. So, Daniel, thank you for joining us. I want to talk about your organization in a second, but I know you've been listening to our conversation about Christopher Lane. Can you share your thoughts on this editorial claiming that if Barack Obama had a son, would he look like Christopher Lane? Obama and the White House will not comment on this case. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, Marie, first of all, thanks for having me. And I really enjoyed listening to the conversation you guys were just having. And your guest made a really excellent point about that story. You know, on the Christopher Lane story, you know, I think really the important thing to focus on right now is President Obama sitting down on CNN, I think it was today or yesterday, talking about Syria and what's going on over there. Horrendous hospital war crimes happening. Him talking with Antoinette Tuff, the hero of Decatur, Georgia, who were calling for to receive the Presidential Medal of Freedom. So those are really, I think, the important stories to focus on concerning President Obama right now.
Well, but I still think that Christopher Lane is an important story. I'm not saying that President Obama has to comment on this, but I do think that that is also an equally horrendous case, just like Trayvon Martin's death, that should be talked about. And why are these teens feeling bored and shooting for fun and tweeting, I hate white people, or an iteration of that? And so that is also a conversation I think we should be having. I don't need the White House to have a conversation about this, but I need the nation to have a conversation about this, just as we had a conversation about race in the flip side with George Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin. That
Sure.
But I think we are talking about that, Mari. I think that, you know.
But that was this iTunes commenter's point. He said, why aren't people talking about Christopher Lane? And I'm not putting it on him, but I'm saying, you know, people were outraged and marching in the streets because of Trayvon Martin. But do you see the distinction, though, Mari? They were marching and they were outraged because this man hadn't even been arrested yet. And it looked like, remember, the investigators came out and said, we're not going to arrest him. We've looked at the facts, we've looked at the evidence, and we don't feel like there's a case here. That is what pissed people off to the point of boycotting, marching, and the like.
Yeah,
right?
really, again, Marie, I have to, you know, second that and agree with what she just said. It really, you know, these are two separate cases. I don't believe in this what we're seeing happening a lot when things like this happen. This moral relativism popping up all over the place. I'm getting tweets from you know, everybody and their mom trying to you know, pursue that argument, and I just don't think it's not, you know, we're talking about
false
apples
analogy.
and oranges.
Yeah, it's a false analogy, and that's not to take anything away from the tragedy that is the death of Chris Lane. And I think that people just don't necessarily want to hear that, but that's really what it is. Yeah,
it really just underlines the need for common sense gun control in this country, and so I'm really happy to see you know folks in Australia. You know, standing up and saying, you know, we're going to boycott America, and you need common sense gun legislation. That's the real important issue.
That is an argument I can agree with. I agree that the two cases are different in that the outrage stemming from the wake of Trayvon Martin's death was the fact that it took so long to charge George Zimmerman. Absolutely. But I do think that this case is equally worthy of a discussion of a different issue, which is gun control, or a related issue to George Zimmerman. Daniel, I want to ask you, tell our listeners and our viewers about Million Hoodies, why and when you started it.
Sure. So Million Hoodies was created in the aftermath of Trayvon's shooting. And, you know, I was outraged and really felt like I had been in similar situations that Trayvon encountered. And I just felt like that could have been my little sister, that could have been my brother. And that to me was unacceptable. So I created Million Hoodies, wanting to kind of change this hoodie symbol from a negative to a positive. And even though it really is about the person of the color of their skin underneath the hoodie to me really came across as a really powerful symbol. So we asked people to you know, tweet pictures of themselves and participate in the march in Union Square, and we drove people to a petition on change.org, which ended up becoming the fastest growing petition in the history of the internet, and which was then leveraged by Trayvon's parents to lead to George Zimmerman's arrest, which was really awesome. Since then, we've been working on developing as an organization to take on issues like Stand Your Ground, issues like Stop and Frisk, and develop, you know, educational platforms, develop a college campus network, and really just work with young people, kind of try to be the voice of young people on these issues, because, you know, we're the ones that are getting shot and killed every day, or profiled, and yet, you know, we don't get to be on many of the national news channels. And
that's why I was going to ask you next. You talked about the movement in the beginning and focusing particularly on this case, and now you've talked about expanding it. After, now that that case is over in the criminal justice system and that verdict has been reached, and I want to get your opinion on the verdict as well, what are you doing to kind of shift the focus to a broader focus?
Yeah. Well, I mean, like you said, I mean, Trayvon Martin is really just the tip of the iceberg. We've seen so many cases like this, or not exactly like this, but, the Marley Grahams, the Oscar Grants, the Rekia Boyds, the DJ Henrys, the list goes on and on and on. So what we know is that we have to, yes, justice in each case is great, and that's what we want. That's what we're going to work for. But really, we want to attack the root causes of these issues, like justice reform, judicial reform within the United States justice system, like racial profiling and institutional discrimination in this country, things like that. And so, yeah, we're developing an educational platform. We're in talks right now with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. We are developing a relationship with the Roosevelt Institute to create, again, a college campus network where young people can focus on developing policy around these issues, not just, talking and raising their voices, but actually creating powerful change.
And was it difficult for you and your organization, after working so hard to change the stereotype of the hoodie, to bring George Zimmerman to justice with the Million Hoodie March? I attended actually one of those marches in Union Square last year with the petition, to then see George Zimmerman at the end of the day get acquitted.
Yeah, absolutely, Marie. It was, I've cried every day since that verdict, and but I'll tell you, those tears have really calcified now, and now we are even more determined because of that verdict to make sure that this never happens again. So I can tell you, everybody on our team is just working around the clock. Most of us are volunteers at this point, and it's amazing to see. So we're doing this virtual March on Washington tomorrow. People can tune in on mhoodies.org.
Well, that's great.
That's great. Just piggybacking off that, Daniel, obviously we are celebrating the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington. What are just your reflections and thoughts on that, and how do you see what you're doing as perhaps parallel or at least influenced by that movement?
Yeah, absolutely. I was on the plane to Los Angeles last week, and there was a great documentary called King, and it had a ton of never-before-seen archival footage of the March on Washington and just of Dr. King's life. And it was just really, really powerful and really just, reminded me of the importance of tomorrow and what it represents in terms of our national history. I really see this as the continuation of Dr. King's dream of, creating a better America and a better world. So, now we're updating it with a little social media for the modern generation. And so the virtual March on Washington it's a commitment to Dr. King's vision of creatively pursuing the path to glory.
Excellent.
Well, Daniel, thank you so much for joining us. And for our viewers and listeners, that's Virtual March on Washington. Daniel, if you could give them again the information of how to get involved and information on how to reach out to you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So folks can go to mhoodies.org, join up, contribute, sign up, whatever you can, log in, and you can watch the live stream all day tomorrow. You can interact with our speakers and our guests via social media. And then on Sunday, we're asking people around the world at 7:16 p.m., which is the exact time of Trayvon's death, to tweet a photo of themselves in hoodies and take a moment of silence for Trayvon, and using the hashtag #HoodiesUp. So we're doing those two initiatives, and we've got a lot of special guests and a lot of really cool things lined up.
It's incredibly impactful. That's great.
Well, thank you so much, Daniel, and hopefully we can have you on again. Yes. But again, that's the virtual March on Washington, and then on Sunday at 7:16 p.m., posting a picture with the hashtag #HoodiesUp.
Yes,
all right.
And all of this is driving people towards to sign the petition to help pass the End Racial Profiling bill in Congress right now.
Great.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Daniel, for joining us. And
My
actually,
pleasure. Thanks for having me.
thank you. Actually, our Tipping the Scales, our viewer question of the week, is related to what we have been talking about.
Yeah.
Law and Order Special Victims Unit.
Yes.
They are doing an episode. They're shooting an episode currently. It's going to air in October, based on the events of the Trayvon Martin case. And it's not unusual that Law and Order SVU pulls from the headlines these cases, But a lot of people have reacted to this. Sybil Shepherd actually is going to play the Zimmerman-like character. So it's going to be a white woman who's going to be the shooter. And it's also going to be a black teen. They had some shots from shooting, and it was actually people doing Million Hoodie marches. So Daniel's campaign is being featured in Law & Order SVU outside the courthouse with, they obviously changed the name, and they're protesting outside. And I want to get viewers' reactions on this. Some viewers reached out to me already on Twitter, and one said their problem with it was that Law & Order SVU so often portrays black people as the aggressors and not as the victims. And now, once this headline-grabbing story has taken place, for once, they're switching, they're changing their attitude just for this story.
I don't know if I buy that. I've been an avid, loyal viewer of SVU Law & Order and the original series and all that stuff since I was a kid. I think that they do this. You know, we saw this with Chris Brown and Rihanna. They pull things, sensational headline stories, and I think more than a lot of actual television shows, they try to do a decent job of showing diversity and balance in terms of racial diversity and things like that. You know, I think that argument is weak, and I think that I applaud SVU for, you know, staying true to their format. This is their pattern. This is their format. I don't really know why this is a surprise to anybody.
And now, Daniel, while we still have you on the line, what do you think about the episode? I mean,
yeah, you know, I haven't had a chance to see the episode. But you know, I'm similarly a fan of SVU, and I think what they do and how they approach their show, you know, kind of life imitating art, art imitating life is a very important a medium right now. So I just hope that, you know, when I, you know, of course I'll have to make a final decision once I see it, but yeah, I don't have any kind of philosophical problems with them doing that.
And actually, another viewer tweeted at me. They wanted to know if the Sybil Shepherd or the Zimmerman character is going to be acquitted like happened in real life or not. So we'll have to tune in to watch.
Yeah, because sometimes SVU changes the ending. Again, with the Chris Brown and Rihanna thing, it was, you know, she ended up dying at the end of that episode. So sometimes they leave it open-ended. We saw this years ago when they profiled the Michael Jackson molestation case. So, you know, well, again, I agree with Daniel. We'll wait and see what happens in the episode, but I don't see what the problem is so far.
Yeah, and like Daniel said, I think it's bringing attention. It's keeping the story in the headlines, which is important because it keeps these issues at the forefront.
Right.
And so that episode is airing in October. So that's our Tipping the Scales for the week. Tweet me at Mari Fagel.
Tweet me at Ebony_K.
And give us your opinions on that. And thank you again, Daniel, for joining us. And that is our show for the week. Actually, next week we are not shooting, but the following week I have a very important guest, Akila Shrills. He'll be joining us. That's September 6th. So make sure to tune in. And thank you, everyone, for watching.
Thanks for watching.
From producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, Dario Kristen, and the entire BHL staff, we would like to thank you for tuning in to the Black Hollywood Live Network. If you have questions or comments, tweet us at BHL Online or email us at info@blackhollywoodlive.com. For more exclusive content, visit blackhollywoodlive.com. This has been a presentation of the Black Hollywood Live Network. The views expressed here are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of BHL or its owners or principals.